We're live. Welcome,
We're
everyone.
here.
Welcome to this live recording of the 6 to 7 Figure Women podcast.
Today's episode, I'm really excited about. We have a phenomenal guest, Aga Bajer or Bayer. How do we say that?
Bayer.
Bayer, Aga Bajer. And she is the founder and CEO of CultureBrained. And today we are going to have a fantastic conversation, of course, about building company cultures. Seven-figure secrets, of course, is what we always talk about. Today's topic is culture. Aga, would you introduce yourself and kind of give our audience an understanding of who you are?
Absolutely, happy to. So my name is Aga Bajer. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called CultureBrained, and we have a business unit that is a culture consultancy. And then we also run a community for culture leaders working in organizations on shaping their company culture. Both of these businesses are quite successful. We love growing them and working on supporting our clients and our community members to cultivate the sort of environment where people can do their best work. I personally strongly believe that work can and should be synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. And I think we all know that on average, in an average organization, it's quite far away from this ideal. So we have a lot of work to do, and it's quite exciting to be at the forefront of that and create better workplaces.
I love that. When we were looking at your topic, Jess, can you remember what you were most excited about? I know you do. So what were you most excited about to have Aga on today?
Well, firstly, I'm excited that we're very international today because Aga, you're joining us from Athens in Greece. Megan, you're joining us from, I want to say Denver. I don't want to get it wrong. Colorado.
Denver, Colorado.
In the US. Yes,
correct.
Good. Just want to check. And I'm joining from the UK. So, isn't technology amazing? But the thing that I was really excited about is that I see with clients all the time, they have often left corporate because they've been on the receiving end of this toxic corporate culture where they've maybe experienced bullying, or they've been part of something that they haven't enjoyed and hasn't left them feeling good. So it's this weird paradoxical thing where you think, I never want to be in that situation again. I never want to experience that again, and yet the culture they then create in their business is almost identical, with things like overwork, micromanagement, not trusting other people to do things, feeling like they have to do everything themselves. They can create almost the identical culture sometimes, which is so difficult because then they're kind of like, oh, this must be like what consulting is like. And it's like, no, this is because you are unconsciously imprinting this thing that you don't want to be seeing. But I think it's really hard to create culture consciously when you're in that micro business, 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure stage, because it can feel like, well, there is no culture. I'm just being me. I'm just doing business. But I think that there are some really exciting and important things that we need to have consciousness of as we are building our businesses, because we don't build a bad culture on purpose, but we do it without realizing, because we're building it without realizing that that's actually what we're doing.
Yeah, I really resonate with what you have just shared, because I've seen it so many times. And you're so right that I think a lot of people, and we have seen a wave that has been referred to as great resignation, where people leave corporations to set up their own business. And for a lot of us, me included, it felt like a great opportunity to start from scratch and create something amazing, including workplace for our teams. And yet, as you say, what we often end up with is a duplication of what we experienced. And one common denominator often is that we bring ourselves along with our habits and ways of working. And also, as you've mentioned, culture, and I think that's why it's so difficult to shape it. It's very often, an analogy that people often use is it's like water. You swim in it every day, but it's quite invisible. And it really takes place between people, but in such a way that we get habituated to it and we fail to notice it. So absolutely, we carry these habits with us into our own businesses. And the moment, and the point that you've mentioned, oh, it's just me doing business. It may be true at the very, very beginning, but the moment you start creating a team, the moment it stops just being you and it starts being a team, even if it's just two people, you suddenly have a culture, whether you are cultivating it intentionally or not. And the reality is that if we're not being intentional about cultivating the sort of culture that A, can help us be successful, and B, can help us feel proud of what we're creating, it's probably not going to happen on its own. So intentionality is so incredibly important here from day one, really, even when we are on our own. And I did it personally. I sat down and I started thinking, when I build a team, when I can afford to hire my first employees, what sort of culture would I like us to have? What do we stand for? What are the ways of working that I'd love to see in my company? And how would I like that to be different from what I experienced when I was still in corporate?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I think as well, it can feel like, are we the toxic one? We've kind of brought it with us. But I think sometimes toxic culture happens not because people are intentionally trying to be toxic. It's just because they're not bothered or they're not intentional about creating something better. Sometimes leaders and managers, they can treat people underneath them badly, not because they are bad people or they mean bad things for them, but just because actually they're busy with a lot of other stuff and it falls through the cracks. And so it's not even that, it's like you've been affected by the toxic bug and now you're spreading it where you are. It can just be like lack of intention and sometimes a bit of thoughtlessness, I think. But it's really refreshing, Aga, that you sat down and did that, because I am convinced that is something that many entrepreneurs do not realize they need to do.
Yeah, I think so too. And, I sat down and did that partially because that's what's at the heart of my work. We are a culture consultancy. We run a community for culture leaders. So if we don't do that, then who will? So I think that's one of the reasons. But also, what I was really curious about, and that goes back a long, long, long time ago, was what happens when people are not dreading Mondays? Because I think one of the signs that a culture is becoming toxic when people have that pit in their stomach, the Sunday scaries, when you're like, ugh, it's Monday tomorrow, and we're starting to feel stressed. And there are so many different reasons for that. It may be outdated systems or colleagues who are not very collaborative, million reasons, but there is some friction there in our environment and we stop enjoying work. I was super curious, what would the opposite of that look like? And what does it look like? Are there people out there who actually think it's Monday tomorrow? Great. And, feel excited about starting the work week. And so I started searching for these people and asking them some questions about, tell me about it. Tell me what happened when you felt excited about your work, when you enjoyed your work, when Monday was no longer this day of, here we go again. And I discovered that there are a lot of differences in how people experience the workplace, but there are also some fundamental similarities. And I've been able to identify 3 pillars, basically, to thriving cultures that help people to do their best work. And that was one of the key findings in my research. I realized that people love their jobs when they can do the best work of their career, when they can do the best work of their career without burning out. And I think these two things are important. So on one end, I think we all have that hunger for mastery and excellence. And Dan Pink talked about it in his book Drive. We know it from a number of psychologists that we have these fundamental human needs, and one of them is the need for mastery. So it's really important, but often it comes at a cost and with a price tag, and very often that price tag is burnout. So for me, and now the way I define a thriving culture is a culture where you can do your best work, you can continuously grow and basically push that benchmark. So whatever your best work is becomes something different and even better as you grow, as you develop, but you can do it without burnout. So I'm happy to dive into details around that, because it was quite revealing to me that we all have these experiences, but when asked about, right, so tell me, what do you think are the pillars of a healthy environment, people struggle to answer this question. And so I'm happy to talk about what these pillars are and how people can invest to create a healthy environment.
Megan, you're talking, but we can't hear you. It looks profound by the look on your face. Are you still there?
Indeed. But we still can't hear you.
Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, no. This has never happened before. Do you want to try check your settings quickly? But yeah.
Yeah. She says she'll figure it out.
Megan is going to figure it out. She's going to, well, while Megan does that, Aga, tell us about the 3 pillars, because that sounds fascinating. And it sounds like the very stuff that we need to know.
Yeah. So here are the three things that I've discovered that were present really in every single story of fulfillment and peak performance at work. The first one was people mentioned that they had a sense of fun, but not the sort of fun that we associate with startups like ping pong tables or Friday pizza parties, not that sort of fun, but the joy of work itself. In other words, we really enjoyed the work that we're doing. And in order to be able to do that, there are certain conditions in place. So I dug deeper to figure it out, like when do people enjoy the work that they're doing? One thing that stands out is we need to be stretched. So actually having work that is monotonous, routine, or super easy, it's not that engaging. We want to be stretched, but at the same time, we need to be sufficiently supported. So there's a little bit of Goldilocks rule there. We need to strike the right balance between doing the difficult stuff, but also having what we need to be able to deliver on it. And it involves resources, it involves coaching or mentoring, it can involve the right tools, it can even involve things like the space to do deep work. You know, one of the things and one of the mistakes that we make in our companies, we have way too many meetings. And then what people end up experiencing is a full day of back-to-back Zoom calls. And then after 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., your real job starts. So speaking of, you know, being able to do your best work without burnout, that's not going to be possible if you start doing your real job after 5 p.m. So that right balance needs to be there. And these are all conditions for individuals. They need to have them as an individual to have a sense of fun. The second thing is what happens in my team. And do I have opportunities with people that I value and respect to co-create and collaborate? So very often these stories of fun at work are stories of an incredible team of amazing individuals who made something together. Very rarely would I hear, you know, I pulled off this amazing feat on my own. We don't really enjoy being on our own that much. And I think, speaking to your audience, very often of women who start from scratch, very often we are alone. And I think one of the common experiences that we all relate to after leaving the corporate is we miss our teams. Like, it can feel super lonely. So that was the second element. We need these opportunities to co-create and collaborate. And finally, at the company level and cultural level, people mentioned the sense of levity and humor. We don't need to take ourselves too seriously to do great work. And very often, actually, humor can help us to overcome stress. And as we know, stress is something that stands in the way of our ability to be creative or solve problems. So it's actually a fantastic tool to create that atmosphere and environment where we can engage the creative part of our brain and come up with extraordinary solutions to problems. So that's fun in a nutshell. Really, really important. The second pillar is meaning. And I think particularly with the young generations coming into the workplace, this will not be a surprise to anyone anymore. People are not just coming in to work for the paycheck. I think for us as entrepreneurs, we don't go into business just to make money. Most of us want to make a difference. And the way it transpires through a company culture and the conditions that you need to have in place for people to have a sense of meaning is, number one, people want to know that they're going to be able to accomplish their personal goals and aspirations through their work. So this is a selfish part. Like, am I going to learn something new, or am I going to be able to develop my career here? We all have our personal ambitions, and a healthy culture is a culture that actually cares about that and wants to find out, what do you need, and what do you want to get out of this job, just for you, not for the company, but for you. The second thing at the team level when it comes to meaning is, do I have experiences, and can I see how what I'm doing has an impact on others? Because if it doesn't, it can feel quite demotivating. And a lot of people who work in isolation experience that demotivation of, I don't even know if it matters. We need to feel like we matter and our work matters to someone out there. It can be a client, it can be a colleague, it doesn't really matter, but we need to know that it's going to be useful for someone. And finally, when it comes
really
to
helpful, actually. Yeah, sorry, Aga. I think that's a huge part of corporate culture, isn't it? To feel like you're this, when you have one of those job titles that you're like, what does that actually mean? And then you shuffle things around, but like, what does it all achieve? And I think we can often be a lot more close to that meaning and that direct purpose in an entrepreneurial business. But like, it's easy to stray from that, actually, isn't it? Megan, you are back with us. Can we hear you?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
this is good.
Great, wonderful. I love this. I was able to catch most of it. Yeah, I was able to catch most of it. And what I loved was the first pillar, which is fun. My top two values are fun and love. And so everything that I've created in the Dames is all about a culture of fun. In fact, we have an annual funference instead of a conference that we just had last week. So fun is a crucial ingredient embedded into the culture of my community. So I love that. I just wanted to say one thing before we continue with meaning and move into the third pillar. If our listeners are here and can hear us, we'd love to hear your comments. So feel free to comment, and we would love to bring in your questions if you have them, or your comments if you have them. Don't be shy. We want to hear you. We want to see you. So thank you.
Yeah, and also maybe share, that kind of things that stand in the way of a healthy culture in your experience, because it's also interesting to talk about these obstacles. Yes. So absolutely, let us know. But in the meantime, I want to connect the dots here, because you've already mentioned that sometimes in large corporations, it's really difficult to connect these dots. And this is where the third element of meaning comes in, and that's why I believe it's so important to focus on on that impact that we have on others, because sometimes the other meaning, the bigger meaning, the purpose can be further removed from us, and it's not always present in our daily interactions with people. You can be working for an incredible NGO with a very powerful agenda of making this world a better place, and yet in your daily work you can experience zero meaning if you don't have these experiences of impacting others in a positive way. So the third one is that organizational purpose and meaning, and the sense that we're all working together towards a common goal. It's important. But what I see very often is that organizations plaster that somewhere, that organizational purpose, on a poster, and then forget all about it. So it's not working. It's not enough. Just like it's not enough to articulate your core values and say, right, so this is our culture, this is who we are, this is what we stand for. People really need to have daily experiences where, there's less talk about those things, but more experience. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to what culture is what you experience on daily basis when you interact with others. So that's the beef that I have, with very lofty purpose statements. They don't actually do much very often for people in cultures.
Well, I think
Absolutely.
We've all worked in places where they've been put up in the kitchen. And so when you make your coffee or your tea, you're like, these are our values. Okay, then. But there's no connection between you, the person, and what some committee somewhere have decided, and they've printed it out very clearly for everyone to read. But it's a completely different thing to actually have that embedded. And I think that can be intimidating in our entrepreneurial businesses, because you kind of feel like, oh no, I'm probably doing culture by my personality, and is that good or is that not? I think I love what you said at the beginning, Aga, about sort of it's like water, because it's like you try and pick it up and it just kind of goes through your fingers. It's quite hard for it to be tangible and observable to us.
Yeah, I'd love to address that because it is such an important point. Very often when we start this entrepreneurial journey, and this is the narrative, by the way, I think the mainstream narrative when we talk about entrepreneurs and culture is, your company is basically going to be you and your values. And there is this assumption that somehow your team is going to absorb all that wonderful stuff that you are, and that they are going to embody all of the values that you have, even if you haven't clarified what your values are, which, when you think about it, it's a ridiculous
ridiculous assumption.
Yeah. I mean, rationally, when we think about this, we immediately realize, how is that supposed to happen? Even we don't live our values fully, because sometimes we don't know what they are. And Megan, I salute you that you are very clear about what your values are. This is rare. But even if you know what they are, the question is, do you really live them consistently? And I think the first practice, of this culture craft is that values are always aspirational. I'm thinking about probably the most relatable values that our listeners might have, like family or health. And just ask yourself, when you look at your calendar today, you can open it now if you're listening to us now, and you look at what you have on your calendar. Do you see these values on your agenda?
That's a good one.
And for most people, they look at the agenda and they're like, well, no, not really. I don't see these specific values on my calendar. And that's human. We are human. And I think, cultivating culture is always a journey of course correction. But what's important is that we are aware of what are these guideposts for us, what are our values, and be intentional in working and living in a way that aligns. But you'll never be perfect. right? I think, when I think about your value of fun, probably not every single day, every single hour of your day is not fun, right? And it's totally okay. I mean, what's important is when you have a really tedious day that is exhausting and very serious, I think what's important is to have a practice that can inject a little bit of fun in a moment so that you can kind of reset. And I wonder, Megan, if you have a practice to bring yourself back when things get too serious
I
or too
suspect that
formal.
Megan does. I don't know anyone who does fun quite like Megan.
Yes, I have several. In fact, at our events, I created get out of serious tips that I give frequently, where it's like, if you're in those places, sometimes I'll pick up my phone and I'll text one of my best friends in all emojis and have them try to figure out what I'm trying to say.
I love
Or
it.
I have a playlist on my phone of those songs that just lift me up and that I can dance around and be goofy. I have in my living room, I have a 30-second dance party button that I can push and it'll play different songs so I can dance. So for me, a lot of it is shifting the pattern. But I love this conversation because as a marketing and branding coach, it was really important to me to work with my small business clients to teach them how to not only define their values, but define what it looks like when they're living in their values, what it looks like when they're not living in their values, and how they shift to get back on track.
Yeah.
Because that was the way that I saw with my own eyes as an external consultant. That's how I saw them starting to live in their values. And it was really interesting how, 9 times out of 10, when those clients were initially identifying their values, it was a lot of the same stuff like integrity and this and that. And I said, okay, so how do you define that? And in that was where we found the true value. And then I say, okay, so if you're going to purport, let's go with love as my value. If you're going to purport that love is one of your top company values, how are you going to show that? Well, in our culture, we are a bunch of huggers. And if you're not comfortable with hugs, we do high fives. But it's one of those things that is part of our culture. We also have a Care Bear stare, which if anybody was born when I was, you know what a Care Bear stare is. So there are these things that we have embedded into the culture. And when we're not feeling loved, like when I feel or my team doesn't feel respected or they're not feeling loved, we know that that's an immediate filter for, okay, this is something that's outside of our cultural elements that we're really creating. And we have solutions for how we deal with those situations. So are there any other tangible daily experiences that you encourage your clients or that you encourage business owners to really embody and put into their company cultures so that they are being intentional with it, like you said, as opposed to letting it kind of create itself?
Yeah, I'll answer that in a second, but I want to also add an additional element here.
Awesome.
I love everything that you've shared about how we can flesh out our values as entrepreneurs and define them, and also really add some granularity there and make it clear as to how we live them. It's super important. There comes a point in your business, and you and only you can decide when this point comes, when your personal values are not going to be enough to drive your business forward. Your culture and your values need to do two things for you. They need to enable you to be successful as a business. So in other words, they need to be a strategic enabler of your business. And they also need to help you stand out from the crowd. But if they are only your personal values, it will be very hard to create a diverse team. And therefore, it's going to be very hard to create a culture that enables your business to be successful, because we all know that diversity is one of the key drivers to success when your business grows. And one of the things that we do to help entrepreneurs to co-create their culture with their teams and co-design is we use a series of storytelling exercises where people actually talk about things that happened that illustrate who we are at our best as a team. So it's not just about the individual, it's not just about the founder, but it's about how the team works together to accomplish success. And then we help these teams to basically decode these stories for values. And that's how you co-create your values with your team. It's based on your lived experiences of when you excel, when you accomplish something amazing, and the instances that you truly feel proud about. And then there is this piece also around, right, so this is where we are today. This is what greatness looks like today or in the past. How about the future? What will help us to get from here to there? Because sometimes you will need different skills, but also potentially a slight shift in values as well as a team. And so an important thing that our listeners can do as founders, as entrepreneurs, is be super clear as much as you can, because of course we're navigating an uncharted territory as business owners, and especially I think these days with how things are shifting and evolving, it's very hard. But as far as you can, think about what is your vision for this company in the future? What change do you want to create? And then talk with your team about what will it take for us to get from where we are today to what we envision in the future. And what are the shifts in our values or in our culture that will need to happen in order for us to steer in that direction? So what you accomplish by that is you co-create, but also you kind of implicitly state, this is a constant evolution. We need to change as individuals, but also as a team and as a company. We will continuously need to evolve to get to where we want to get. Now, back to your question, Megan, about what are some of the practices that can help us to kind of align with our values and the culture that we want to create. I'll share an exercise that you can do with your team. There are so many things that you could do, but one quick one that is easy to describe and easy to carry out with your team. I call it your culture pre-mortem. So not a post-mortem, but pre-mortem. And
That's more
basically,
useful.
yeah, what it calls us to do is to imagine that we failed miserably in what we're trying to accomplish as a business. And then ask ourselves, what, if this failure took place, like what would be the things that led to this failure culturally? And very often teams will come up with ideas like, we didn't really challenge each other enough. We were trying to be nice and build harmony on the team, but we were not honest enough with each other. And what that practice does when you think about the potential failure and the pre-mortem is it allows you to prevent those things from happening and makes you even more intentional about what you really need to cultivate in your team. And maybe you realize, hey, you know what? We actually need more intellectual friction, not less. Maybe we need to be less nice to each other, but kinder. Or maybe we need to redefine what love really is. Perhaps, apart from hugs and high fives and supporting each other, it might be also giving each other difficult feedback, the sort of feedback that's difficult to share, but also difficult to hear. So having these conversations, it's almost like contracting with each other and agreeing, okay, so this is how we want to move forward together. And I think these conversations can be incredibly important. And putting it in a hypothetical scenario, by the way, it makes the conversation a little bit easier. Because if you ask people what is wrong with our culture today, everyone is suddenly like, I don't know if I feel comfortable going there. But when you say, okay, hypothetically, if things went terribly wrong, what could go very wrong based on where we are today, and how can we prevent it from happening?
Right, exactly. I love this conversation so much. And I really think that when I would work with these larger small businesses, it was like, how do we take all of the values of everyone and mesh them together and work together on the culture. But I love the approach that you're suggesting to take, and I much more prefer the example that you're sharing here of we have to look at both sides of the coin. Because if we're only looking for the positive, we are oftentimes blindsided by the negative. And if we don't call it out and we don't address it, then there's often a lot more problems that exist,
100%.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Did you talk about the third pillar as well?
I was about to say that.
Not yet. Not
We
yet.
took you on a detour.
Yeah, so let's circle back. So the final one is about belonging. And it's really shocking how much evidence there is right now of what a huge driver of performance and well-being at the same time a sense of belonging is in the workplace. Like 5 years ago, no one was really talking about belonging in the workplace. We certainly have this expectation and human need. I mean, from Maslow's time, he talked about human needs, and basically belonging is a human need immediately after something that we start pursuing immediately after we feel safe and meet our physiological needs. And yet in the workplace, for some reason, we completely overlooked it. But again, when I talk to people about their experiences of the time when they enjoyed work and at the same time were able to do the best work of their careers, they talked about 3 things to me. One, they said, I felt seen, heard, and valued as an individual. So it went beyond my role and what I was able to do for the business, but people truly saw me as a person, not just a number, or not just as a person who has a specific role. The second thing that people told me is that we had a sense of psychological safety in my team. And again, there's plenty of evidence and plenty of research from Google Aristotle program to Amy Edmondson's work and Tim Clark's work that shows that high-performing teams have that sense of psychological safety, which basically translates into it's safe on my team to learn, to contribute, and to challenge the status quo. And what I mean by safe is I know that I'm not going to risk my relationships with my colleagues if I challenge them or if I try to learn something new, right? So very often there is risk, of course, of failure. That is quite an objective one, but at least you know that, for example, no one will blame you when you fail because that's simply part of the culture. We know that we only move forward through failures. The important thing is to learn from our failures and correct them, and clearly also take calculated risks. So that's the second part. And the third thing that people told me was that they actually felt aligned with the organization's values and proud to be a part of this organization. I think that sense of pride, when you think about your personal experience, I think everyone who's listening to us will be able to identify that. There are moments when you really want to be part of the team because it stands for something that fills your heart with joy and with a sense of pride. And this is such a tell when it comes to do I have that sense of belonging? And also, do we have a healthy culture? When people feel proud to be a part of the team, that's certainly a really good indicator.
Absolutely. I really feel that we all just need to look at consciously how we are treating our teams and our people and the opportunities that we're giving them. It's interesting because the one point that I felt as a ping as a small business owner was, that feeling of it's safe to learn, contribute, and challenge the status quo. I see this very often in small businesses when they're trying to grow to have full-time employees and they're trying to allow those people to have more autonomy. Mm-hmm. And they tell their employees, it's safe for you to do this. It's safe. I want you to tell me what you see as wrong or what you see as room for improvement. But then when the push comes to shove and those employees share those ideas, they often get shut down.
Yeah, because it's personal, right? When you
Right.
are still a small business, basically every criticism feels like a personal attack because it's your baby. You
Right.
created it. And you know how
Yeah.
much effort and how much love and passion went into it. And it's really hard to hear criticism about that.
Which is why we have to, as business owners, in my opinion, one of the most valuable lessons that I'm still learning is not to take things personally, because we're missing out on a lot of really great feedback and ideas when we take offense. And yes, sometimes employees could share those ideas with us in a little bit easier way or whatnot, but you may as well create a way for them to share it without feeling, maybe even anonymously, and then have somebody on your team who's strong enough to read that information and to decide and filter it and figure out, okay, how do we use this information? Because sometimes those critical points are the most valuable than rather than just surrounding yourself in an echo chamber.
Yeah, 100%. And especially for small businesses, because by nature, you don't have that much diversity of backgrounds, diversity of experience, et cetera, et cetera. So every voice is valuable and it should really be able to express itself fully. So I couldn't agree more. It's so incredibly important to step back and give people the space to evaluate how we're doing things, come up with ideas, and also have the autonomy to experiment and do something that they believe is going to work better than what we have been doing so far. And I certainly know from personal experience how hard it is, especially as I imagine for a lot of your listeners, your personal brand is on the line as well, because very often these small businesses are not these anonymous brands, but often it's your name and your face, right?
Yep. And I actually wrote that down at the very beginning, that this is a lot of the philosophies that we apply to our personal brands, we can apply to our cultures, because it's no matter what, however you're showing up, wherever you're showing up as your personal brand. You're also building your company culture. And it's very similar. If you're not intentionally growing your brand or creating your brand, you're not, it's being created by those around you for you. And similarly with your culture, if you're not intentionally creating it, it's being created by those around you for you. So
100%.
that's fascinating. So Aga, would you let us know, and then we'll ask some more questions. I think you have a book that you are launching or that you've launched, and what else? How can people get in touch with you? What are the next steps for people who listen to this?
Sure. So I'm currently working, but it's still early days. So it's going to take a while for the book to be published. I'm working on my new book, my second book called The Culture Craft. And I regularly post about the stuff that is going to be in the book, predominantly on LinkedIn and on my blog at agabajer.com, so people can check it out. People can go to my website and see what we do as a business, and also visit our community page and see what the community is all about. Thank you for asking. And a good place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. I accept invitations, happy to answer any questions. So if anyone wants to reach out, I think that's probably the best place to reach out.
Beautiful. And Jess, as your clients and potential clients are facing this topic of culture, and undoubtedly what I'm sitting here thinking about is, oh boy, another thing for us small business owners to worry about messing up, right? How can they work with you to get their heads right, let's say?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I coach 6- and 7-figure women consultants and thought leaders. If you feel like you are awesome and your business does not yet reflect this in terms of the revenue that it generates and the profit that it generates to you, come and speak to me. I'm very good at bringing people's business into alignment with the impact that they're already having. I love to go really deep with women. I love to help them not just in the business, but like in the mindset and the blocks that are showing up. I think that a lot of these blocks will be affecting your company culture already. So if we can deal with these, if we can work through them from a personal growth perspective through our coaching, this will be good for you. It will be even better for your team. So if that sounds good, come and find me at jessicaferney.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If you've been listening to our episode today, please do connect with all of us and send us a little connection note to be like, I just listened to your LinkedIn Live, because we would love to connect further and hear what you enjoyed about the episode and continue the conversation after that. Megan, how about you?
Yes. So as the founder of the Dames, what I'm always looking for is to connect with fabulous, mission-driven, heartfelt, but not so serious women who are growing and leading their companies around the planet, those who are growing and leading 6, 7, and 8-figure businesses. And I'm just really excited to take these concepts that we talk about here, because we have, what's different about us in the Dames is we have these different level think tank circles, as we call them. The word mastermind is starting to not be so appealing any longer, but really we come together and we talk about these tough subjects that we are facing at that 100K, 250K, 500K, and 7-figure plus level. Those are the issues that are facing all of us today. And we love to talk about things such as culture, such as your finances, your mindset, those things. And you really get to be around your peers in these groups as you get through these challenges, and of course, celebrate your wins. Yeah. So Jess, what are other questions that you may have for Aga as we have our final few minutes here?
Well, yeah, I think I've been reflecting while we've been talking, because I'm in the camp of, I feel bad saying this. I feel like I do quite a good job with my team. I think they like working with me. One of the things that I've embedded in the team, there are probably lots of faults of mine that have showed up in the last kind of 3-4 years that I've been working with my current team. But like, one of the things that they said recently that they appreciate is that I give them a lot of autonomy. I delegate the outcome, and I'm kind of like, I don't care how you do it. Like, can you see if you can make it happen? And they're both the personality of like, they love to just really get in. But I was thinking, like, what are my values? And I've been playing with things like excellence, because that is also really important to me. But then I have this thing, everyone is allowed to be human. And so like, I think we set a high bar in my business behind the scenes. Like I've hired people, I've been really lucky to find people who actually genuinely don't make that many mistakes. But if they do, like, it's okay. Like, they can admit it, because I'm not going to have a go at them or fire them. We're going to look at, like, did something bigger go wrong and what can we do next time? But I think the other side of that is I'm very fiercely protective of my team. And when people speak in a rude way to them, which does happen sometimes, it's like, well, they don't do it twice. Because
Absolutely.
I wouldn't tolerate that for myself. And I think I notice when people will speak politely to me and won't speak politely to my team members, who I respect and value very much. So I think that there must be another value in there of like, you speak to them in the same respect that you would show me. Yeah, like there's this kind of, I see them as equals, and I respect them very much. Whereas I think sometimes there can be a tendency for people to treat team members as almost like minions or less than. Whereas I think in my team, I work hard to not allow them to feel that way or allow other people to treat them in that way. Aga, I would love your perspective on that drive for equality and treating people in a certain way. Is that something that you come across in the work that you do?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's actually the only way to unlock the potential of our team members. And as you've mentioned, Megan, it's the golden rule, right? Treat others as you want to be treated. There is also the platinum rule, which is treat others as they want to be treated. So I think taking it a level further, know your team and explore, how people want to receive feedback, how much autonomy do they like, how often do they want to check in with me. Because what happens very often, and I'll take the example of the autonomy that you've mentioned, is we tend to move forward with our teams within our own comfort zone. You, from what I'm hearing, feel quite comfortable giving people responsibility, autonomy, just delegating the outcomes, but you don't want to tell them how to do things. It's not true for all leaders. It's a great quality to have. But I
I
think
often don't know how we should do it.
yeah, that's true,
So
right?
it's kind of like, I don't need to know. Don't educate me
Yeah,
on this. It's not important information to me. Like, it's important that you
yeah,
know, and I hope you want to find out.
100%. 100%. And I think when we have that strength, or we feel comfortable with something like that, like giving people, trusting people that they have the expertise or the creativity to solve problems, we assume that this is what people want from us, and often we overdo it. And so what I see often is that, for example, especially, if people deliver, you might just leave them to their own devices and maybe not be in touch as often as they would like. So I'd say just, being sure that the things that you feel comfortable doing, that your team feels comfortable with as well. And from time to time asking, who are you at your best at work, and what do you need from me? How can I best support you in doing that? I think this is an interesting conversation to have with our teams as well.
I love that question. I was just thinking about how you've given us so many gems in terms of, even as I'm thinking about it, we have positioned our values, our company values, externally differently than we talk about them internally. So we have trading high stress for high caliber, collaborate fearlessly, get out of serious, and evolve in broad daylight. So these are the values that we talk about as a community and as members with one another. But when we're talking about them with our team, I'm having the conversations a little bit differently so that we can all make sure that, one of the things that's most important for us in order to be able to collaborate fearlessly is that we know each other. So we all take Myers-Briggs, Strength Finder, Enneagram, and Human Design, and we learn those about each other so that we can really give each other the respect of saying, I'm not you, you're not me. We don't think the same. We don't feel the same about things. And so I'm going to give you the respect of really understanding you and seeking to understand you more and more. And we also believe in our own personal growth on our team and within the Dames as well. So it's important that we're not just saying, okay, I checked the culture box off my list. This is something that never is checked off.
100%.
It's something that has to be in your team meetings. It has to be in your culture. It has to be in your culture. It has to be embodied in everything that you're doing. I just love it. It's so exciting.
And it's like mowing the lawn, right? You can't just mow it once and say, okay, I'm done with that. It just takes really consistent work. And I guess that's what makes it so hard, because, you can never stop. I absolutely love that. I think it's so important, such an important point to bring, that it's a never-ending journey. And I think also linking it back to something that you've mentioned, and also one of your values, by the way, evolve in broad daylight, I think it was. Our culture is going to evolve, and our companies are going to grow or not, depending on how much we as leaders are willing to grow out in the broad daylight.
Absolutely.
I think the biggest obstacle to our business growth, and going back to your work, Jessica, and what you do with your clients, I think your work is so important, because we talked about these obstacles and the things that hold leaders back. And it's not just leaders that are held back. It's their business, as you say. It's their team, because unless we're willing to do the work with ourselves, it's, we cannot create a healthy culture. It really does start with us.
It starts and it ends with us.
It was
as
really
the founders.
interesting. Yeah, like even this year, I've been really aware in my own business, and I think it's like a result of going through the pandemic, which, you know, for all of us, like if you can keep a business going through what we've been through for 3 years, you know,
Mhm.
I really think you can survive anything. But I was definitely aware that I had just got in the habit of like not really committing to the business and feeling quite like it could all go away within a matter of months, like the world could shut down. And it wasn't like cognitive, I think it was like a body thing. But I was just
Mm.
suddenly like, do you know what? I have been holding everything in the business back because I don't commit to like the next quarter, and I don't have a big planning horizon. And I sat down and I said to my team, I hope you'll be proud of me. This is what I've done. I sat down and I planned out all of my workshops for 18 months in
Mhm.
advance. I went right to the end of December 2024. And I was like, I can see my fear of like things changing, the business changing and like getting smaller, because once you get it big, then you fear that it will get small. But like, I was like, my fear is affecting the way that they are able to do their job, because they say, Jessica, can we start doing the next workshop? And I'm like, I don't know when it's going to be. And I don't know what the topic is going to be. So I was like, right, commitment is
Mm.
happening. And since I did that, I think it was probably 3 or 4 months ago, things have really changed, and I can see how much more freedom it's given them. And I
Mhm.
really do think that's a key thing, that like as the company leader, which we don't always see ourselves as when we've got a small team, but like what I've observed time and time again is that the fears that keep us up at night, they come
Yeah.
out in the business. And because people
Mhm.
are asking us all day long to make decisions, if you're terrified that your business is going away, you're not going to be able to see the bigger picture. If you're terrified
Mhm.
that you're doing a bad job and you're not good enough to be that kind of leader, every time you get put in like a leadership meeting where people are just asking you, what should we do about this? What should we do about this? Should we say yes to this? Should we say no to this? And it's like, I don't
Mm.
know. So I really do think that kind of having that self-awareness and being able to see, gosh, my body has gone into fight or flight just in this
Mhm.
meeting, you know, and starting to understand that, it really makes a big impact on how easy it is for everyone else to support us and to move the business forward. And it is that thing that I think we've all mentioned today, of like, our team can only help us as far as we are willing to let them. And
Mhm.
so I think this culture conversation for me is so important, because it kind of ties all of these things together. It's not just about kind of how does it all feel. It's like, what can we be doing differently today, from today, now that we have this awareness?
That's a
Yeah.
perfect question to end with. Holy cow.
Indeed, indeed. And you know, you become a human guidepost by doing those things for your team as well, because you're really embodying the
Yes.
kind of behaviors, right, that you want to see more of. What
Yes.
a great story. Thanks for sharing that.
Aga, is there anything that you'd love to leave our listeners with as we close out today?
Well, my main message to our listeners is never think that it's too early to be intentional about your culture. If you have one employee, it's the right time to be intentional, because culture is a little bit like scrambled eggs. You know, when you scramble them, it's quite difficult to unscramble. So, being intentional, starting right, building that right foundation, it's never too late. It's a little bit like with planting a tree. You know, the best time for it was 30 years ago. The second best time is today. So it's one of those things that we shouldn't delay.
I love that. That's beautiful. Jess, is there anything you want to say in closing?
I just want to say thank you, Aga, for being with us and sharing like your framework with us, and just like having this conversation, because we like to talk on this podcast about the things that women maybe don't think they need, but they definitely need. And I feel like it's been so important today for opening up this topic and just helping us all to feel into it, because I think it's impossible to listen to a conversation like this and not be like, what are my values? How am I doing in
Mhm.
this area? So thank you, Aga, for being with us and everything that you've shared.
Thank you,
Yes.
Jessica. Thank you, Megan, for having me. And also thank you for doing the work that you are doing. It's much needed. I think, especially as women in business, we need support. We need the community. We need very often the guidance, right? And we are not used to asking for help. And so I think having people like you who can help us overcome the obstacles that we have in the way we think about what we're supposed to be in the world is so incredibly important. And we do need more women entrepreneurs and more women in successful women in leadership roles. So I'm deeply grateful for the work that you're doing.
Yes, me too. I can't wait to read your book when it comes out, Aga. I'm very excited for it. And in the meantime, I'm excited for us all to stay in touch on LinkedIn and to catch your brilliance there. So thank you all for tuning in live and listening to this episode of 6 to 7 Figure Women. Have a great day, evening, wherever you are.
Thank you.